Story. Story. 3. This is a Story. By Jeannette Armstrong. Summary. The story, Que-Ans, by Jeannette Armstrong unfolds along the picturesque landscape of the Okanagan River, where the construction of a dam introduces a thought-provoking narrative that blends environmental concerns with cultural insights. This tale delves into the complex interplay between human development and the natural world, while also touching on themes of resilience and the preservation of indigenous traditions. Set near the Okanagan River, the story introduces us to the central character, Que-Ans, an indigenous woman who has lived her entire life in harmony with nature and her cultural heritage. The river serves as a lifeline for her people, providing sustenance and spiritual connection. However, the calm rhythm of life is disrupted when plans for constructing a dam are unveiled. The impending dam's construction symbolizes human intervention in the natural order, signaling a potential threat to the delicate ecosystem and the indigenous way of life. Que-Ans, like the river itself, embodies resilience and resistance in the face of change. She represents the voice of her people, advocating for the preservation of their ancestral lands and traditions. As the dam's construction progresses, Que-Ans' determination to protect her heritage intensifies. She recognizes the significance of the river beyond its practical utility, understanding it as a sacred entity interwoven with cultural practices. Her deep connection to the land and water drives her to engage in acts of peaceful protest and advocacy. Through her actions, she embodies the spirit of indigenous resistance, standing against the encroachment of development on their sacred spaces. Jeannette Armstrong's narrative weaves together the voices of those who are often marginalized in discussions of environmental change. Que-Ans underscores the importance of understanding and respecting the perspectives of indigenous communities, who possess a profound knowledge of their lands and a commitment to maintaining their harmonious relationship with the environment. As the story unfolds, Que-Ans' efforts become a rallying cry for her community and beyond. The tale delves into the tension between economic progress and the preservation of cultural heritage, underscoring the need for a balance between human development and environmental stewardship. Que-Ans invites readers to reflect on their own roles in shaping the world around them and their responsibility to protect and preserve the environment. It prompts contemplation about the power of individual actions in the face of larger forces, and the importance of intergenerational knowledge in sustaining cultures and ecosystems. In summary, Que-Ans, by Jeannette Armstrong, is a thought-provoking story that intertwines environmental concerns, cultural preservation, and the resilience of indigenous communities. Against the backdrop of the Okanagan River and the looming dam, Que-Ans' journey highlights the complexities of human progress and the need to honor the traditions and ecosystems that have long thrived in harmony. Through Que-Ans' unwavering determination, the story resonates as a call to respect and protect the delicate balance between nature and culture, urging readers to consider the impact of their own actions on the world around them. A. Multiple choice questions. 1. Columbia River lies in modern day. A. USA. B. Mexico. C. Colombia. D. Canada. Canada. 2. The term swallow is term for the white people. A. Appraising. B. An insulting. C. Complimentary. D. Honorific. 3. Que-Ans was surprised with the men in Okanagan because A. They were smartly dressed. B. They were well-built and robust. C. They could not speak the local language. D. They talked to her enthusiastically. 4. Salmons could not go up the stream because of the A. High currents of the river. B. High mud content in the river. C. High dams made in the rivers. D. High arsenic content in the river. 5. At last, Que-Ans makes plans to A. Destroy the dams. B. Reconstruct the dams. C. Retrofit the dams. D. Check the dam. Extra MCQs. 1. What is the primary setting of the story, Que-Ans, by Jeannette Armstrong? A. A bustling city. B. A dense forest. C. The Okanagan River. D. A mountain range. 2. What major theme does the story, Que-Ans, explore? A. Space exploration. B. Political intrigue. C. Cultural preservation and environmental concerns. D. Romantic relationships. 3. The construction of a dam in the story symbolizes A. Environmental conservation. B. Indigenous rituals. C. Human intervention in nature. D. An economic boon. 4. How does Que-Ans' relationship with nature and her heritage influence her actions? A. She disregards them for personal gain. B. She fights to protect them from threats. C. She isolates herself from her community. D. She seeks to exploit them for profit. 5. What does the Okanagan River primarily represent for Que-Ans' people? A. An obstacle to overcome. B. A source of danger. C. Spiritual and nourishing connection. D. A place for recreational activities. 6. How does Que-Ans react to the announcement of the dam's construction? A. She is indifferent and ignores it. B. She immediately protests and leads a revolt. C. She embraces the change as progress. D. She consults with the government for compromise. 7. In what way does Que-Ans stand against the impending dam's construction? A. By seeking compensation for the land. B. Through acts of peaceful protest and advocacy. C. By becoming an employee of the construction project. D. By negotiating with the developers. 8. What does Que-Ans embody in the story? A. Ignorance and complacency. B. Resilience and resistance. C. Rebellion and disobedience. D. Apathy and disinterest. 9. What does the story suggest about the significance of the river to Que-Ans? A. It is a source of danger and fear. B. It represents a way to escape her problems. C. It holds spiritual and cultural importance. D. It's a reminder of her family's history. 10. How does Que-Ans' perspective on the river contrast with the dam's construction? A. She believes the dam will improve the river's ecosystem. B. She sees the river as expendable for development. C. She views the river as a sacred entity tied to her culture. D. She thinks the dam will make the river more accessible. 11. What does the term intergenerational knowledge mean in the context of the story? A. Knowledge passed down from one generation to the next. B. Knowledge shared among different cultures. C. Knowledge gained through formal education. D. Knowledge specific to a single individual. 12. What does Jeannette Armstrong's narrative emphasize in Que-Ans? A. The superiority of urban living over rural living. B. The insignificance of cultural heritage. C. The power of technology to solve environmental issues. D. The importance of respecting indigenous perspectives. 13. How does Que-Ans' resistance affect her community? A. It causes division and conflict. B. It inspires unity and change. C. It leads to economic growth. D. It results in indifference. 14. What is the primary lesson that Que-Ans teaches readers? A. Progress always outweighs cultural preservation. B. Economic development should come before environmental concerns. C. Indigenous voices and traditions should be respected. D. Individual actions have no impact on larger issues. 15. What is the tension that the story explores? A. Conflict between humans and animals. B. Competition for natural resources. C. Struggle for political power. D. Balance between development and cultural heritage. 16. How does Que-Ans' connection to the river impact her actions? A. She feels indifferent about its fate. B. She becomes angry and confrontational. C. She is inspired to protect it at all costs. D. She uses it for personal gain. 17. What does the Okanagan River symbolize for Que-Ans's community? A. A barrier between different tribes. B. A source of transportation. C. A spiritual and cultural lifeline. D. A potential area for tourism. 18. How does Que-Ans's story resonate as a call to respect and protect the delicate balance between nature and culture? A. She promotes exploitation of the environment. B. She disregards the importance of cultural heritage. C. She emphasizes the need for economic growth. D. She fights to preserve her heritage and the environment. 19. What does the story suggest about the relationship between environmental and cultural preservation? A. They are unrelated concepts. B. They are in constant conflict. C. They can coexist harmoniously. D. Cultural preservation always trumps environmental concerns. 20. What is the primary reason Que-Ans's efforts become a rallying cry for her community? A. Her charismatic leadership. B. Economic incentives for the community. C. The promise of fame and recognition. D. Her dedication to preserving their heritage. B. Short questions. 1. What did Que-Ans use to do in the past? Que-Ans is described as a mythical figure who traveled up the Columbia River to the Okanagan River, previously bringing salmon to the Okanagan people and making them happy. Now, after a short nap, Que-Ans is back and eager to visit the Okanagan people again, as they are Que-Ans's favorite. The anticipation of a feast with salmon accompanies Que-Ans's journey upstream. Que-Ans is making a return journey from the Columbia River to the Okanagan River. This isn't the first time Que-Ans has taken this route. There was a previous occasion when Que-Ans traveled up the Okanagan River, delivering salmon to the villages of the Okanagan people. This act of bringing salmon to the villages brought immense joy and happiness to the people, making it a cherished gift. This happened long ago. After waking up from a short nap, Que-Ans continues walking upstream with the desire to reunite with the Okanagan people. These people hold a special place in Que-Ans's heart, and visiting them always guarantees a delightful feast with plenty of salmon. 2. How does Que-Ans see the high structure in the river? After waking up from a short nap, Que-Ans continues walking upstream with the desire to reunite with the Okanagan people. These people hold a special place in Que-Ans's heart, and visiting them always guarantees a delightful feast with plenty of salmon. As Que-Ans continues walking along, the landscape has changed significantly since the last trip. Many Swallow people, who are not part of the Okanagan culture, now inhabit the area. They have built numerous houses, making everything look unfamiliar to Que-Ans. Surprisingly, there are no signs of the people or their villages, which leaves Que-Ans feeling perplexed. During the journey, Que-Ans encounters a massive structure across the river, known as the Grand Gully, which is a large dam. It stretches extensively and blocks the flow of water. Que-Ans is puzzled by this imposing structure and feels uneasy about its presence. Que-Ans contemplates going to the Kettle Falls, where the salmon chief resides, but doubts that salmon would be able to pass through the dam, no matter how high they could jump. Despite feeling hungry and not finding any people yet, Que-Ans decides to proceed further up the Okanagan River to the region where the people had once joyously received the salmon brought by Que-Ans. 3. Why are the fishermen not able to talk to Que-Ans? Que-Ans retraces the river's path and starts heading up the Okanagan River. As Que-Ans progresses, the fear of encountering another imposing structure like the Grand Gully comes true. At Chief Joseph, Que-Ans finds another one of these structures stretching across the river. However, this time, Que-Ans spots a couple of people fishing beneath it, the first people seen along the river. Approaching them with anticipation, Que-Ans expects a warm greeting and a display of respect, considering the history of bringing salmon to these people and being respected in the area. However, the young men do not respond and continue fishing, seemingly unaware of Que-Ans' presence or unable to understand Que-Ans' language. Trying once again to engage in conversation, Que-Ans speaks louder and slower, inquiring about the fishing conditions and the possibility of catching large fish at this time of year. Despite the effort, one of the young men responds with a shoulder shrug, signaling their lack of knowledge, and attempts to convey in swallow talk that they don't understand the Okanagan language. This encounter leaves Que-Ans surprised, as it becomes evident that these young men and potentially the entire community are unable to comprehend the language of the Okanagan people. This realization highlights the extent to which the swallow culture has overtaken the area, affecting communication and cultural connections with the original inhabitants. 4. What does the old woman report Que-Ans? Que-Ans tirelessly searched for someone who could still speak the language of the people. Eventually, Que-Ans found an old woman, a member of an ancient headman family from a particular village. When she saw Que-Ans, she recognized the visitor and burst into tears, expressing her despair and longing for Que-Ans' return. She explained that things had taken a turn for the worse since the arrival of the swallows, who had built a massive structure across the river, reminiscent of the dams Que-Ans had broken in the past to bring salmon to the people. However, this new structure seemed more formidable and destructive. Que-Ans attempted to lighten the atmosphere with humor, joking about oversleeping as an excuse for not returning sooner. This had been a known characteristic of Que-Ans, frequently sleeping longer than necessary, even for crucial events. Despite the attempt at humor, the old woman continued to cry and share her grievances. She felt unheard and forgotten, lamenting that nobody paid attention to her or remembered Que-Ans. She urged Que-Ans to go to Vernon, located in the North Okanagan, to seek out a man named Tommy. According to her, Tommy was still talking about Que-Ans and might be able to shed light on the situation and what had transpired in Que-Ans' absence. This emotional encounter revealed the profound impact of the swallow's arrival on the people's lives, causing significant changes and upheavals in their culture and way of life. The quest to find answers and solutions to the problems caused by the swallows became even more urgent for Que-Ans. 5. Why does the old woman suggest that Que-Ans should go to Vernon? The old woman suggests that Que-Ans should go to Vernon because she believes that Tommy, a man residing there, may have valuable information or insights about the changes that have occurred in the people's community since Que-Ans' absence. Tommy is known to talk about Que-Ans, which indicates that he might have knowledge about the events that unfolded when the swallows arrived, and brought significant disruptions to the people's way of life. Vernon, being in the North Okanagan, might have become a central gathering place or a hub for information exchange among the people. It is possible that Tommy has interacted with the swallows or has witnessed firsthand the changes they brought to the region. Thus, the old woman sees Tommy as a potential source of information and guidance for Que-Ans in understanding the current situation and finding a way to address the challenges posed by the swallow's presence. The suggestion to visit Tommy in Vernon reflects the old woman's hope that Que-Ans can receive some clarity and support in their efforts to restore the balance and harmony that once existed in the people's community before the arrival of the swallows. 6. How does the headman express the helplessness of the entire tribal people? The headman expresses the helplessness of the entire tribal people by conveying a sense of resignation and acceptance of their current situation. He admits that the tribe is facing significant challenges and changes due to the presence of the swallows, who have brought new ways of living and doing things. However, he also acknowledges that they have no choice but to adapt to the swallows' lifestyle in order to survive and sustain their community. When Que-Ans suggests breaking the swallows' dams to allow salmon to return, the headman dismisses the idea, stating that it would only lead to trouble. He emphasizes that the tribe needs to work with the swallows now, even if they don't entirely agree with their practices. He highlights the need to earn money, have jobs, and embrace the swallows' ways to ensure their survival, as that is the reality they find themselves in. The headman's response reflects the prevailing sentiment among the tribal people, who feel compelled to conform to the swallows' dominant culture and economic system. It reveals a sense of powerlessness in the face of external forces that have drastically altered their way of life and made them dependent on the swallows for sustenance and livelihood. This helplessness is further evident in the headman's refusal to consider Que-Ans' perspective and the urgency to restore the natural order. Instead, he prioritizes the tribe's immediate needs and survival, even if it means compromising their traditional values and practices. The headman's response serves as a poignant portrayal of the struggle and dilemmas faced by indigenous communities when confronted with overwhelming societal changes and the loss of their cultural heritage. 7. According to Que-Ans, why is it necessary to change the monsters? According to Que-Ans, it is necessary to change the monsters because they are destructive beings that harm both people and the environment. The monsters, in this context, refer to the swallows, who have brought significant changes and destruction to the land and the traditional way of life of the tribal people. Que-Ans observes that the swallows are like monster people, who act selfishly and without regard for others or the natural world. They have built huge dams that block the rivers and prevent salmon from reaching their spawning grounds. This has not only deprived the people of a vital food source but has also disrupted the natural balance of the ecosystem. The monsters, swallows, have taken over the traditional lands and villages of the people, leaving them displaced and disconnected from their ancestral homes. They have also imposed their own language, culture, and way of life on the people, causing confusion and alienation. Que-Ans recognizes that the monsters' actions have had severe consequences for the well-being of the tribal people. Many are suffering from illness and malaise, and their spirits are broken. The monsters have disrupted the natural order and harmony that existed before their arrival. To restore balance and harmony, Que-Ans believes that the monsters need to be changed. He wants to break the dams they have built to allow the salmon to return, and he wants the people to reclaim their traditional way of life and culture. Que-Ans sees the urgency of reversing the destructive actions of the monsters and returning to a more sustainable and harmonious way of living. In essence, Que-Ans' mission is to transform the swallows from being destructive monsters into beings that coexist peacefully with nature, and respect the traditions and livelihoods of the tribal people. By effecting this change, Que-Ans aims to bring back prosperity, health, and happiness to the people and the land they inhabit. 8. How does the salmon chief describe the situation? The salmon chief describes the situation as dire and sorrowful. He reveals that he is the chief of the Kettle Falls, traditionally a position associated with overseeing the abundance of salmon in the river. However, he explains that there are no more salmon coming up the river, and the falls themselves have disappeared due to the actions of the swallows, the monsters. The salmon chief shares the heart-wrenching tale of how his great-grandfather was the last salmon chief to witness the salmon running in the river. Since then, the swallows came and brought devastation, blocking the river with dams and disrupting the natural migration of the salmon. As a result, the people have been deprived of the salmon, their traditional and essential food source. He expresses his frustration and hopelessness in waiting for the salmon to return. The salmon chief confides that he still sees the vision of millions of salmon coming up the river whenever he closes his eyes during salmon run time. However, upon opening his eyes, his vision remains unfulfilled, and he is left feeling tired and alone in the absence of the salmon and his people. Despite the difficult circumstances, the salmon chief finds solace in the words of Tommy, an old man and possibly a leader of the people, who encourages him not to give up hope. Tommy's belief in the return of Que-Ans, who represents positive change and restoration, gives the salmon chief a glimmer of hope that things may eventually improve. In essence, the salmon chief's description of the situation emphasizes the deep loss and longing for the once thriving ecosystem, and the profound impact of the monster's actions on the people's way of life. He portrays a community devastated by the disappearance of a vital resource, and struggling to find a way forward in the face of overwhelming challenges. 9. What is the determination taken by Que-Ans? Que-Ans is determined to take action and bring about positive change for the people and their ecosystem. After witnessing the devastating effects of the swallow's actions, the disappearance of the salmon, and the suffering of the people, Que-Ans realizes the urgency of the situation. Que-Ans decides to break the dams that the swallows have built, which are blocking the river and preventing the salmon from returning. This act is intended to restore the natural flow of the river and allow the salmon to once again reach their traditional spawning grounds. By doing so, Que-Ans aims to bring back the abundance of salmon that used to sustain the people and make them happy. Que-Ans' determination stems from a sense of responsibility and a desire to protect the well-being of the people. He understands that the swallows, who represent the monsters, are causing harm to the environment and the community, and it is crucial to change their destructive behavior. By breaking the dams and potentially confronting the swallows, Que-Ans takes on the role of a transformative figure who seeks to restore the balance of nature and ensure the survival and prosperity of the people. It is a courageous and selfless decision that reflects Quixote's commitment to his community and their cultural heritage, as well as his concern for the environment and the creatures that inhabit it. 10. According to the story, how does the construction of high dams create difficulty in salmon life cycle? The construction of high dams creates difficulty in the salmon life cycle by obstructing their natural migration patterns. In the story, Quixote notices that the swallows, representing the outsiders, have built a huge dam across the river at Grand Cully and another one at Chief Joseph. These dams block the passage of the salmon as they try to swim upstream to reach their traditional spawning grounds. Salmon are anadromous fish, which means they are born in freshwater streams, then migrate to the ocean to grow and mature. When it's time to spawn, they return to the same freshwater streams where they were born. This migration is a critical part of their life cycle. However, the high dams built by the swallows prevent the salmon from completing their journey. The dams act as physical barriers that the salmon cannot pass through, as they lack the ability to jump over such enormous obstacles. As a result, the salmon are unable to reach their spawning grounds, which leads to a decline in their population. The disruption of the salmon's migration has severe consequences for both the fish and the people who rely on them for sustenance. The salmon's inability to spawn means there are fewer fish available for the people to catch and eat. This scarcity of salmon negatively impacts the health and well-being of the community, as they lose a significant source of food and nutrition. The construction of high dams also alters the natural flow of the river, which can further harm the ecosystem and other wildlife that depend on the river for survival. Overall, the dams represent a significant threat to the delicate balance of the environment and the traditional way of life for the people and the salmon alike. C. Long questions. 1. How does the author bring contrast between Western people and native people? The author brings contrast between Western people, referred to as swallows, and native people, referred to as the people, through various elements and incidents in the story. One of the significant contrasts is the difference in language and communication. Quixote, a native figure, speaks in the language of the people, while the Western people, swallows, can only communicate in their own language, which the people cannot understand. This language barrier symbolizes the disconnect between the two groups and their inability to understand each other's ways of life. The story mentions that the Western people have houses everywhere, which are very different from the traditional homes of the native people. The swallows are portrayed as constantly working on their houses, emphasizing a materialistic and consumerist culture. In contrast, the native people live in simpler, more traditional dwellings, reflecting a closer connection to nature and a less materialistic lifestyle. The construction of high dams by the Western people is a prominent contrast in the story. The dams disrupt the natural flow of the river and hinder the salmon's migration, causing negative consequences for the ecosystem and the people's way of life. This highlights how the Western society's technological advancements can have detrimental effects on the environment and the balance of nature. The Western people are depicted as being disconnected from nature, viewing it as something to be conquered and exploited for their own needs. In contrast, the native people, like Quixote, have a deep reverence for nature and its resources. They see themselves as stewards of the land and practice sustainable ways of living that respect the natural world. The story touches upon the cultural values of both groups. The Western people prioritize economic progress and individual gain, as seen in their construction of dams, and focus on material wealth. On the other hand, the native people value community, cooperation, and preservation of their traditions, as demonstrated by their attachment to the salmon and the importance of their language and customs. Quixote is portrayed as a wise figure who possesses ancient knowledge and remembers the history of the people. This highlights the value of traditional knowledge and wisdom in native culture. In contrast, the Western people seem to have lost touch with the deeper understanding of their impact on the environment and their place in the natural world. By presenting these contrasts, the author sheds light on the clash between two different ways of life, the challenges faced by indigenous communities in the face of modernization, and the importance of preserving cultural heritage and environmental balance. 2. How does the author criticize the Western perspective of development? The author criticizes the Western perspective of development by highlighting its negative impact on the environment, indigenous cultures, and the overall harmony of the natural world. Several aspects of the story serve as critiques of the Western approach to development. The construction of high dams by the Western people, swallows, is a central theme in the story. These dams disrupt the natural flow of the river, obstruct the salmon's migration, and lead to the destruction of their habitats. The author criticizes the Western approach of prioritizing industrial development without adequately considering the ecological consequences. The construction of dams is symbolic of how the Western perspective often prioritizes economic gains over environmental preservation. The story portrays the Western people as being disconnected from nature and its rhythms. They are depicted as exploiting natural resources without fully understanding or respecting the delicate balance of the ecosystem. This disconnection is seen in their inability to communicate with the salmon, or comprehend the importance of preserving the salmon's traditional migration routes. The author criticizes this lack of reverence for nature and its creatures. The presence of the Western people and their cultural dominance has led to the erosion of indigenous cultures and languages. The author critiques how the Western perspective often marginalizes and dismisses native cultures as inferior or outdated. The loss of the people's language and traditions represents the detrimental impact of Western development on indigenous communities. The story highlights the contrast between the Western people's materialistic lifestyle, characterized by constant construction and accumulation of wealth, and the native people's sustainable way of life. The Western perspective prioritizes consumerism and economic growth without considering the long-term consequences for the environment and the well-being of future generations. The author presents Que-Ans as a wise figure who possesses ancient knowledge and understands the importance of living in harmony with nature. In contrast, the Western people are portrayed as lacking this deep wisdom and connection to the land. This contrast suggests that the Western perspective of development often neglects the value of traditional knowledge and its relevance in maintaining ecological balance. Overall, the author uses the story to criticize the Western perspective of development for its short-sightedness, disregard for the environment, and negative impact on indigenous cultures. By presenting the clash between the Western and native ways of life, the author advocates for a more sustainable and holistic approach to development that considers the interconnectedness of all living beings, and the importance of preserving cultural heritage and environmental equilibrium. 3. Do you think the author is worried about the loss of native culture and identity? Give reasons. Yes, the author appears to be deeply concerned about the loss of native culture and identity. Several reasons in the story indicate the author's worry. The author portrays Que-Ans as a figure who possesses ancient wisdom and knowledge of the people's language and culture. Que-Ans' return and his interactions with the people suggest a strong desire to preserve and revive their traditional ways of life. The emphasis on Que-Ans' role as a cultural messenger underscores the author's concern for safeguarding native culture and identity. The story highlights the impact of Western development on the people's culture and language. The Western people's dominance and imposition of their ways have led to the erosion of the people's language and traditions. The author's depiction of the people struggling to communicate with the Westerners, and the loss of their ancestral language evokes a sense of concern for the fading native identity. The people's longing for Que-Ans' return, and their recognition of him as a significant cultural figure indicate a desire to reconnect with their heritage. The fact that the people still remember and revere Que-Ans despite the passage of time shows the author's concern for preserving the continuity of their culture and identity. The clash between the Western and native ways of life serves as a backdrop to express the author's concern about the encroachment of Western values on native traditions. The author uses this conflict to highlight the importance of preserving and valuing indigenous cultures. The construction of high dams and the transformation of the landscape by the Western people have disrupted the natural order and the people's way of life, including their traditional reliance on salmon. The author's focus on these changes and their consequences for the people's cultural practices and identity reflects a concern for the preservation of their unique way of life. In summary, the author's portrayal of cultural erosion, the longing for connection to ancestral roots, and the clash between Western and native ways of life indicate a strong worry about the loss of native culture and identity. By weaving these themes into the narrative, the author raises awareness about the importance of preserving indigenous cultures and traditions in the face of rapid societal and environmental changes. 4. How are the white men trying to control the natural flow of the river? In the story, the white men are trying to control the natural flow of the river by constructing high dams. These dams are built across the river, stretching from one bank to the other, creating artificial barriers that block the natural course of the water. By doing so, they can harness the river's energy to generate electricity, control flooding, and provide water for irrigation and other purposes. The construction of these high dams has several significant effects on the river and its ecosystem. Salmon, which are an essential part of the native people's culture and livelihood, rely on rivers to swim upstream and spawn. The dams block the migratory path of the salmon, preventing them from reaching their traditional spawning grounds. This disrupts the natural life cycle of the fish and poses a threat to their population. Dams change the natural flow of the river, leading to the formation of reservoirs behind the barriers. This alters the river's ecosystem, affecting the plant and animal species that depend on the river's natural flow for survival. Additionally, the changes in water temperature, oxygen levels, and sediment transport can have far-reaching consequences on the entire ecosystem. The dam's construction causes the displacement of native communities and forces them to abandon their ancestral lands, disrupting their traditional practices and ways of life. The native people's cultural practices, including fishing and reliance on the river for sustenance, are deeply impacted by the altered river dynamics. The construction of dams gives the white men control over the river's natural resources, including its water flow and energy potential. This control enables them to exploit these resources for economic and industrial purposes, often to the detriment of the native communities and the environment. By building high dams and controlling the river's natural flow, the white men assert dominance over the land and its resources, which has significant implications for the native people, their culture, and the delicate balance of the river ecosystem. The story critiques this interference with nature and its consequences for the native population, highlighting the tension between traditional ways of life and Western development. 5. How does the story talk about the resistance of man's atrocity against the natural world? The story talks about the resistance of man's atrocity against the natural world through the character of Que-Ans, who represents a powerful force of nature and the embodiment of resistance against the destructive actions of humans. Que-Ans, as a mythical being, holds a deep connection to nature and its harmony. The story portrays Que-Ans as a figure from the past who once brought abundance and happiness to the people by gifting them salmon. However, upon returning to the same region after some time, Que-Ans witnesses the drastic changes brought about by the white men's constructions, particularly the high dams, which disrupt the natural flow of the river and prevent the salmon from reaching their traditional spawning grounds. Que-Ans' reaction to the presence of the dams reflects the resistance against man's interference with nature. The dams symbolize human arrogance and disregard for the natural world, causing harm to both the environment and the native people who rely on the river's resources. Que-Ans' attempts to communicate with the local people, urging them to break the dams and restore the natural order, are met with apathy, helplessness, and even ridicule. The story also presents a stark contrast between the indigenous people's close connection to nature, and the Western perspective of development that prioritizes profit and control over the environment. The native people live in harmony with nature, respecting its cycles and understanding the importance of sustainability. In contrast, the white men's actions are driven by a desire for economic growth and dominance, leading to the exploitation and destruction of the natural world. By highlighting the resistance of Que-Ans and the native people against man's atrocity, the story critiques the destructive impact of human activities on the environment. It underscores the importance of preserving the natural world and the need for a more balanced and respectful relationship between humans and nature. Through Que-Ans' determination to bring back the salmon and restore the river's natural flow, the story conveys a message of hope and the possibility of healing the wounds inflicted on the natural world by human actions. 6. Comment on the language of the story. The language of the story is rich in imagery and symbolism, creating a vivid and evocative narrative that transports readers into the world of Que-Ans and the Okanagan River. The author's use of descriptive language helps paint a detailed picture of the natural landscapes and the changes that have occurred over time. By employing sensory details and figurative language, the story engages readers' senses and emotions, making the experience more immersive. the author uses symbolism to convey deeper meanings throughout the story. Que-Ans, as a mythical figure, represents the connection to nature and the wisdom of the past. The salmon symbolizes abundance, life, and the natural order, while the dams and the presence of the swallow people symbolize man's interference and disruption of nature. These symbols add layers of meaning and complexity to the narrative, encouraging readers to reflect on the themes of environmental destruction, cultural identity, and the consequences of human actions. The story also uses dialogue effectively to reveal the characters' perspectives and emotions. The interactions between Que-Ans and the native people, as well as with the white men, highlight the clash of worldviews and the struggles of the indigenous people in the face of drastic changes to their way of life. Through dialogue, readers gain insights into the characters' thoughts, beliefs, and concerns, allowing for a deeper understanding of their motivations and reactions. Moreover, the story incorporates elements of oral storytelling traditions, preserving the authenticity of indigenous narratives. It employs a conversational and informal tone, as if the tale is being shared by a storyteller to an audience. This storytelling style adds a sense of cultural heritage and connects the readers to the oral traditions of the native people. Overall, the language of the story is powerful and poignant, effectively conveying the message of environmental conservation, cultural preservation, and the impact of human actions on the natural world. Through its evocative language and symbolic storytelling, the narrative leaves a lasting impression on the readers, urging them to contemplate the delicate balance between humanity and nature. Best of luck.